Vampirism, the actions or existence of vampires. A vampire, which is considered to be a mythical creature, one that subsists upon feeding on the vital essence of living beings, their blood. But what if I told you that there have been many vampire legends over the centuries and all over the world? Would you entertain the possibility that perhaps out of all of them, one or several could indeed be the real deal? Today we will be discussing a very strange and honestly not very well known vampire case, one that took place back in Europe in the 1700s. The amount of witnesses and said duration of vampiric activity might just make you think. This is the terrifying vampire legend of the monster of Medveđa of Serbia. And this story is truly an interesting one, indeed. Before we begin, I did just want to say I've been sick the last 3 days, so if my voice sounds a little scratchy, that's why. I'm on a bunch of Robitussin and some vitamin C right now, so we're slowly but surely getting over it. But if I don't sound like my normal self, I sound a little stuffy, that's why. The information about the case provided comes from a pretty scarce variety of sources. Given the age of this story, I've done my best to provide you with the most accurate and detail-oriented retelling of it as I could. So, I hope you enjoy the content. Legends of vampires have existed for millennia. Cultures such as the Mesopotamians, Hebrews, ancient Greeks, and even the Romans had tales of demonic entities and blood-drinking spirits, which are considered precursors to modern vampires. Despite the occurrence of vampire-like creatures in these ancient civilizations, the folklore for the entity known today as the vampire originates almost exclusively from early 18th century southeastern Europe, particularly the region that is now known as Transylvania, as verbal traditions of many ethnic groups from the region were recorded and published over the generations. With the Treaty of Passarowitz, the Habsburg monarchy annexed most of Serbia and the northern part of Bosnia, territories which had been part of the Ottoman Empire. These remained in Austrian control until the Treaty of Belgrade in 1739, when the Austrians were forced to cede them back to the Turks. During this 20-year period, these newly conquered boundary districts were subject to direct military rule from Vienna for strategic, fiscal, and other reasons. As a result of the devastation brought about by previous Austrian-Ottoman wars, these areas were in poor condition, with scarce and partially nomadic development, and to attract German-speaking Serbian settlers to the new territories, many of the Serbs, especially those who had emigrated from Ottoman-held areas, were recruited as militiamen, also known as haiduks. These haiduks were for the peacetime protection of the borders, and for regular military service at war, in exchange for unalienable lots of land. It was in these communities that the earliest well-documented vampire attacks occurred. But with that, could there have been any credence to these legends? In the year 1726, a man named Arnold Paoli had just returned from a military tour in Greece. He was a haiduk, and this was a type of infantry soldier, as I previously mentioned, that was part of militaries from the late 16th to the mid-19th centuries. They had reputations from being bandits to freedom fighters, depending on the time frame and the enemies that they had at the time. Upon returning home from his tour of duty, he had a wound upon his neck. This is one of the first things that Paoli's wife Melisa noticed upon seeing him. As she asked what happened, she was shocked to hear what his explanation was. During a patrol, several soldiers, including himself, had been attacked by what they described as a vampire. The creature had ambushed them as they traversed a thick forest during the night. The creature, which he described, had pale skin, wings, and fangs. It had killed several of the soldiers, moving with insane speed and feasting upon the men's blood by biting into them. Arnold would be just one of the 2 men that would survive the attack. But being bitten, his fear began to grow. The common belief during that time is that if you were bitten by a vampire, you had to find its grave and burn it in order to prevent the curse from spreading. So given this information, this is what Arnold set off to do. Over the course of several weeks, as he felt more and more ill, he spoke with locals and travelers alike to try to discover just what or who this creature was and where he could find it. Gathering his strength, he set out to fight the beast. However, upon arriving at its grave, the creature was nowhere to be found. Instead, Arnold ended up defacing its grave and ultimately setting it aflame. Believing that he had stopped the creature for good and stopped the curse from spreading within his own veins, Arnold felt victorious in his own mind. However, he still felt ill. His cold sweats, now coupled with bizarre cravings, persisted. Several weeks after these events, Arnold would be sent home and was now speaking with his wife in his native village of Medveđa. Given all that her husband had discussed with her, Mrs. Paoli was frightened to say the least. But her husband had reassured her that all would be well, that he had followed instructions to the letter to ensure his safety, as well as hers and the neighbors around them. The 2 would go to bed that night for what would be the final time. The following morning, Arnold would be found unresponsive by his wife, and within hours, he was confirmed to be dead. Shocked at Arnold's untimely death and her own transformation into a grieving widow, Melissa would have Arnold buried and would try to grieve him in due time, hoping that her late husband would find eternal peace. However, Arnold apparently did not. Almost as soon as his body was placed in a wooden coffin in what should have been his eternal resting place, and as dirt was sprinkled over him, Arnold seemed to rise from the grave, or so according to multiple people. Within 10 days of his burial, 4 people complained to the city council that Arnold Paoli had visited them, and they all, interestingly enough, had the same exact story. They all had received a knock on their door in the dead of night. Upon answering it, they would meet face to face with the departed Arnold. Although having seen him dead and buried, he was nonetheless there, pale, but alive and in the flesh. Arnold would then ask to come inside their home. As they spoke to him, they acknowledged that something seemed very off about him. Anytime they brought up his burial or his death, he would completely not acknowledge it whatsoever, and would just move right past it, as if nothing had ever happened. He also had an air about him. Something hypnotic sat behind his eyes. He would ask for a drink, and as they fetched an ale for him, upon looking around their home and calling his name, they all then reported being attacked and bitten by him, only for him to then rush out of their homes and into the foggy night. This bewildered the village council members at first. They weren't sure of what to make of the reports, and things became all the stranger when all 4 of the people who had made the initial reports passed away. And they passed away just as Arnold had, which was bizarre to say the least. With multiple corpses on their hands, the council would then order an investigation. They would speak with local military officials and would be surprised to hear that they had heard of this kind of thing before. And 10 days later, following the ultimate deaths of the 4, and approximately a month after Arnold's burial, the villagers, advised by their handnak or their local military leader, banded together and would head to Arnold Paoli's grave. They would arrive at the graveyard on a cold and misty night. Upon surveying, it appeared that the dirt above his casket had recently been tampered with. Biting the bullet, they dug deep into the earth and would make contact with the coffin, after just a few minutes of labor. Upon opening the casket, they would reveal Arnold Paoli and would note some very interesting details about his body. His corpse wasn't decomposed, and his veins were full of blood. Fresh, warm blood flowed from his eyes and mouth. They also found that his skin, hair, and nails had seemingly fallen off and filled the coffin around him, and that new skin, hair, and nails had taken their place. According to their beliefs, they believed Arnold had developed into an arch-vampire, a vampire of considerable strength, and they believed that he indeed had been exiting his grave and feeding, that the curse had spread to him. In order to combat this, after concluding that Paoli was indeed a vampire, they drove a large wooden stake through his heart, and upon piercing his chest, he let out a loud, blood-curdling shriek, and his eyes shot wide open and glanced at those around him. They said that his eyes were blood red, like the devil himself. Deeply frightened but further motivated to ensure that he couldn't harm anyone else, they would cut off his head, dismember his body, and then would ultimately burn his entire body. They then proceeded to go grave to grave to all of Paoli's supposed victims and do the exact same procedure to ensure that they wouldn't turn into vampires themselves. Although disturbing, the villagers believed that they had ensured their safety and had successfully cleansed their land of the plague of vampirism. However, this happiness would be all too short-lived. Roughly 5 years later, in the winter of 1731, amid the snowdrifts, livestock began to be feasted upon by an unknown creature. The creature left 2 fang marks upon the necks of goats and sheep, the very lifeblood of the village, their food source. Following this bizarre discovery, as people began to eat the livestock to survive the harsh cold of the winter, a new epidemic was sinking its teeth into the village. People soon became ill after eating the animals, and they quickly complained of stabs in their sides and pains in their chests, prolonged fever, and jerking of the limbs. They typically would only last 3 days after contracting the sickness, and the age of the newly deceased varied greatly, from the very young to the very old. In total, 13 people would pass of this mystery disease in just 6 weeks. Disturbingly, a newborn infant had contracted the illness through their mother through breastfeeding, and upon its passing, it was buried, only to be dug up and drained of all of its blood within hours of its burial. The villagers, concerned and scared, would report this information to their local military leaders, and the responsibility would ultimately fall upon a lieutenant colonel with the last name of Schneza. Schneza, fearing the pestilence, sent for the Imperial Contagions medical team, roughly their version of an infectious disease containment team that resided just 1 village over. While waiting for their arrival, he began his investigation. Malnutrition was common in the area due to Eastern Orthodox fasting practices. However, the villagers were not malnourished. And as he continued to look into the matter, other reports began to trickle in of new deaths, violent deaths, at the hands of this unknown creature. 2 more people would pass away. Fear soon overtook the entire village, and families began staying with one another at night, often 2 to 3 families to a home. They would watch over each other in shifts in order to stave off whatever this creature was. After several of his own men were attacked on patrol, Schneza began to believe the rumors that this creature could possibly be a vampire. Those who were familiar with the legend of them would inform him that the illness and deaths would only cease if the vampire or vampires were found and slain. Fearing that the citizens would abandon the village if nothing was done, and upon the arrival of the disease control group, a new commission was formed, and this commission included a military surgeon and 2 other high-ranking officers, and the investigation would be furthered with new intensity. On January the 7th of 1732, the commission, along with village elders and military officials, would exhume the graves of the now 18 people who had passed, and what they would find would shock them. 6 of the corpses were decayed, and this was normal given the time frame of death, but 12 out of the 18, however, were not. Their veins, again, were filled with fresh blood. They appeared as if they were sleeping. Some had a pale complexion, and others a light red complexion instead. Their skin, hair, and nails appeared to have fallen off, and new hair, skin, and nails had taken their place. Fearing the worst, believing those 12 to be exhibiting signs of vampirism, they would begin the cleansing, the age-old practice of staking the hearts, dismembering the bodies, burning them, and then disposing of the ashes. As they went grave by grave and staked each person, almost every single one of them screamed and opened their eyes, revealing blood-red orbs staring back at them before fading away. Following this event, a report would be made and would be submitted further up the military chain of command, and it bared the signature of 5 officers in total. The report would spur much interest in what was taking place, and come to find out 6 other villages in the area were dealing with the exact same thing. So the investigation would grow from one village to a region-wide one, involving numerous military officials and elders of the time. Over months of searching and investigating for the root cause of the supposed vampirism, it would be concluded ultimately that the now deceased Arnold Paoli had not only killed the 4 persons of whom he had contacted, but he had also feasted upon several oxen. The new vampires who were created not only fed upon the villagers, but their livestock as well, once they had turned. However, they had believed that they had tracked down all those affected by the vampirism as they rested in their graves, waiting for their next feedings, and had ended their ungodly existences, ensuring the safety of themselves and furthermore, the region. The results of this report would ultimately help inform and train future regiments of how to deal with the plague of vampirism if they should ever come across it. This case to me is so interesting because not only is it scary given the descriptions and the actions of the supposed vampires, but the fact that so many people, and people of prestigious status within the military of the time, were involved. And they were the ones who made the ultimate conclusions in the report. It's also interesting that it almost describes vampirism as a type of disease, one that transfers from bites and eating the flesh of animals that had been bitten, with some people dying of its effects, and others dying but turning into vampires themselves. It also describes the hierarchy of vampires in a sense, that some are more powerful than others. Now, but is it true? I mean, according to those of the time, it's absolutely true. Now, we know that superstition and lack of education in regards to the human body and decomposition are things during this time, for sure. That trapped air, body fluids, etc. can and will exit a body upon death, especially over time. And we do know that hair, nails, and sometimes skin retract, given the appearance of growth on a corpse over time. But if what they said was true, we do know the dead bodies don't grow new hair, skin, or nails, and that their eyes wouldn't open and glance as if they were alive. I also have to say that the pale appearance and the light red skin on some is interesting because we don't usually picture vampires as having red skin. Usually they are portrayed as being pale. At least that's where my mind tends to go. And maybe that's just a pop culture thing. It's hard telling. And the descriptions of their eyes being blood red like the devil himself is just creepy and terrifying to me. Like it gives me the chills. I mean, imagine something like that staring you down. Like, no thanks. So was it real, or was it the imagination of the people of the time and the age in which it took place in? Ultimately, that conclusion is yours to make. But I do have to say, it's made for one hell of an interesting story. That's for sure. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you're liking the addition of the new cryptid stories alongside our usual paranormal cases. And let me know if you're liking the new format. I'm trying to kind of find ways where I can deliver content to you a little bit faster. And I don't know, I just feel like I'm talking more directly to you guys now that you can kind of see me face to face. And I don't know, it just feels cool. I hope you guys like it. Like, all around, it's gotten me out of my comfort zone, which sometimes can be a good thing, and I'm quite liking where it's going, and I'm sure I'll improve over time. I'll probably add some cooler stuff in the background so it doesn't look as boring. With that, guys, don't forget to like the video, subscribe if you're new here, and if you're not new here, turn notifications on, because apparently YouTube doesn't like to promote my content anymore, which kind of sucks. But anyways, I don't have enough time or energy to be able to spam you. Not that I would anyways. And of course, please share this bad boy around so that some new people can enjoy the content as well. Other than that, guys, I'm throwing a lot of info at you, but if you have a particular story that you would like me to cover, whether it's a cryptid story, paranormal, or otherwise, go ahead and let me know down in the comments below as well. And as always, this has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Remember to please stay safe out there, especially from vampires. And take care. I'll see you next time.